Hello and welcome to the January 2023 LAPPG meeting. We have Jem Schofield tonight, who is no stranger to the LAPPG. He's a good friend, so we are excited to have him. And we're going to be focusing on lighting and shooting interviews, a small to no crew workshop. And I'm excited because this format's kind of different for us. It's really going to feel more like a workshop. So that should be a lot of fun. And actually tonight we're stepping into the production world. So that's what we're going to be covering this evening. Well, thank you so much, Joe. I know you're super busy, so we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. I'm not going to chit-chat too much. I want you to get right to it. We are thrilled to be learning from you. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Welcome, everybody. Good to see, well, I can't see anybody, but I can feel you over the interwebs. And it is my third time doing something with LAPPG. And I've done a couple of these live online workshops. It's a little bit of an organized chaos, which is totally fine. I'll tell you just a couple of quick things. It's sort of the housekeeping stuff. We'll see if it all works. If it doesn't, I'm not going to apologize. Okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. Yep, name done, company done. That's my YouTube channel. Check that out. And I just launched a new teaching or lessons or course platform, which is the c47.teachable.com. There's a link to it on my YouTube channel, and just posted my first lesson. Thank yous go to the following companies for today's workshop. Avenger, Aperture, Fuji, Manfrotto, Matthews Studio Equipment, Nanlite, Rode, Roscoe, Sound Devices, and Westcott. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to LAPPG, to Wendy, to Woody, and maybe to Mike Volinsky as well. Small to no crew is what I like to focus on in terms of production. We're going to talk about some equipment. We're going to talk about some setups. I'm going to stop sharing. And as Wendy said earlier on, the Q&A is the place to put questions as we go through this stuff. So it's kind of rolling Q&A during the entire workshop, presentation, whatever you call this thing. So I'll be looking at that, but I will not have the chat window open. So if you have a specific question, you can ask it. Woody, Wendy will be taking a look at stuff as well. So if there's a question that relates to something I'm talking about here in the space, then they can just let me know there's a question. And if for some reason you can't hear me or see me, let me know now, because otherwise we're in trouble. Again, great to see, or at least feel everybody out there for this. Let's jump into everything. So I think the first thing to do is just sort of tell you how this is going to run. I'm going to be turning on and off lights like that. So they're going to go off and on. You'll see, let me just turn on a couple of other ones here so you can kind of see what's happening with that. And hopefully these little remotes and things are working the way they're supposed to. They usually work until right before I start doing this stuff. And then I have some different cameras here. So there's an overhead camera. That'll be part of what we do in the beginning. I have another wide camera right here. So this will let you see the space that I'm working in and the setups and the equipment that we're using. And that's basically what we're going to do. So let me go ahead and turn off this overhead one behind me for now, and we'll get over to just talking about some of this equipment that I have here on the table that I'm going to be using. And by the way, the key light, the thing that's keying me right now, is by Nanlite. It's called the Mix Panel 150, and it's a bicolor light that has a hard and a soft feature. It's LED, and I'm just bouncing it off of essentially a white sound blanket. So it's just giving a nice big soft wrap light. It is actually the light that's lighting the table as well. And let's take a look at some other equipment. So the first thing, I just posted a video today on these lights. They're very, very small little 60 watt chip on board which is a COB type light, and it's a bicolor light from Westcott. These are great in controlled environments. You have a pretty good range in terms of color temperature, 2700 up to 6500 Kelvin. And then even at 1%, they're very bright. So they have a lot of power here. You can see that's the light up at that's 100%. You can see that it's blasting, and you can see the color temperature changing there. So we'll probably use this light in the setup, but if you check out my YouTube channel, you can see a full video using that light and some of Westcott's modifiers. Some other stuff that I'm going to talk about. This is from Matthews. This is called a mini grip head, and it's a composite material, and this is called the mini Mathellini clamp. And I'm going to use this to hold a reflector. I use it all of the time. In fact, I probably have about 6 of these and 8 of these, and they're great. You want to have regular grip heads and Cardellinis and Mathellinis and things, but those are very, very handy. And then just talking about some of the fixtures we're going to be using, this little light right here is really interesting from Roscoe. It's called the Dash Light. It is like most of the LEDs that are coming out now. Most of them are either bicolor or they also have full color. So you can dial in and go into these menus. But the thing that I love about this light is it also has some pretty interesting modifiers. So you've got this magnetic modifier system here for combining or just kind of blocking the light. So you can see here. So this is a great little light that we'll use for something today. And then, we've got questions here. Do I generally recommend bicolor lights over daylight only? I'll answer that in a second. Prices. I don't know the prices of these things. I mean, I have an idea. The L60 light here is under $300 US. I believe the Dash is similar to that, though it's a very different type of light. And then we have this light here, which I have a 3-light kit of. They're heavy. This is the P60C from Amarin, which is part of Aperture. And this also does RGB. It does bicolor. It's quite the light in terms of stuff. It's under $400 US, and it's incredibly bright. And you can see I'm in a color or hue saturation intensity mode here, but I can switch over, and I'm battery powering this thing right now. So this is running off of a couple of Sony NPF style batteries, but of course you can just plug it into mains and it comes with that stuff as well. And this is also right now at 1% intensity, and it's got so much power to it, this little light, for the cost, that it's definitely something to consider for your kit. And then also from Aperture, we have this little tube light. It's called the MT Pro. It also does, well, you can see here, it does color, and it also can obviously just do CCT or correlated color temperature, which is what we would use for standard stuff. And the range of correlated color temperature on here is huge. It goes all the way up to 10,000 Kelvin, which is going to read as very, very blue, very cool light. And then I'm just going all the way down to see how far this goes. Goes all the way down to 2,000 Kelvin. So 2,000 to 10,000 Kelvin. We'll find a use for this, either using the color feature or just maybe a high correlated color temperature. And then this is a 2-foot tube light. This one happens to be from Amarin. It's called the T2C. There's some other ones out there on the market. And then remember that P60 that I showed you, it also comes with modifiers. So you get this little soft box that pops up and goes over here, and a little grid. So that can be nice if you want to control your light and your spill. All right, I'm coming over to those questions first. Do I generally recommend bicolor lights over daylight only? I'm not going to type. I'm going to answer live, but I'm not going to click on that button because I don't know how all that stuff works. But the answer is yes, usually, because we're coming into so many different environments nowadays where there are mixed color temperatures or you don't know exactly what the fixture is. I think that unless you're just looking for pure raw output out of an LED light, then I would say that it would be better to have a bicolor. Gives you more flexibility. Um, can the lights be used on household power? The answer is 1,000,000% yes. The power draw from LED technology is so much lower than standard incandescent base fixtures and also even HMIs. So yes, I mean, we're talking 60 watts here. We're talking, 60 watts here. Most of the fixtures that I have don't draw more than 300 to 600 watts. And I'm using, Bill, for video switching an ATEM Mini Pro. So that's what's letting me switch between these different angles here. And then I'll just answer a couple other questions, and then we'll start jumping into some setups because we don't have a lot of time. You can definitely use the tube light for fire effects and things like that. Most of these fixtures, even the ones that aren't necessarily RGB, will have some special effects in them to replicate things like a television or paparazzi bulbs going and things like that. So that's kind of a standard feature we're seeing in newer fixtures now. Frank says, is it best to just get a daylight light and put gel if needed? I would say that the answer is probably no for LED lights because gelling LEDs, they already have reduced color spectrum, and then gelling isn't necessarily always the best thing to do. You can get some really nice effects from that, but I would tend to go with a bicolor light that allows you to change your Kelvin color temperature throughout. I think it's a better way to go with LEDs. That's not necessarily true for a standard quartz halogen fixture, but which has full color spectrum. But for LEDs, definitely go with bicolor would be the way I would go. And I love soft boxes and things like that, Anthony. And in fact, we'll use one or two of them today. There we go. All right, let's jump into some stuff. Because again, I want to make sure that I can show you as many things as possible. And just seeing if there's anything else. Boom. I mean, there's some really great lower cost alternatives to LED lights right now, but these companies that I'm talking about, and there are other companies out there as well, that are making very good quality LEDs at an affordable price. So Westcott, Amarin, which is part of Aperture, Roscoe, and they also have some higher end fixtures. There's some really great stuff out there. So let me get this overhead light on. Boom. Let's go ahead and switch over to the sort of wide space view here so you can see that. And then we can start to get into some things. I think we're going to start off, and I'm going to turn lights on and off, and you can see sometimes I'll come over here as well because I can actually switch cameras over here. So if you see me doing that, that's what I'm doing. And then I'll come over and check for questions every once in a while to see what's there. So just put those up. I'm going to actually invite London over. He's going to be our talent today. So London's just going to come in and sit in for me, which is great. So London, if you wouldn't mind coming in and sitting down, that would be great. He might also help crew a little bit, and that's what we're going to do. So that'll be switching with that. This is not the lighting right now, but we'll be switching over to that hero camera sometime so we can actually see what's happening with our lighting and things like that. Oh, and one question while I'm over here from Mark asking about this backdrop. Thank you very much. This is from Monfrodo. It is their panoramic background and historically has been used a lot for green screen style setups. But they do have other fabrics. This one is called granite. And what's great about this backdrop is it's about 13 feet wide and about, I think it's 7 feet high. So it really can work well. As you can see, I'm using it here as well in a larger space. So it's really good for that type of stuff. And The cost, I believe the base cost is somewhere around $600 to $800 US, and then you buy additional fabrics, so on and so forth. All right, so let's start getting into a couple of things, and I'll call out the fixtures I'm using and sort of what I'm doing modifier-wise. But for me, the goal always is small to no crew production, right? So it's, can you do this by yourself or a crew of 1 to 3 people? So I'm trying to do things on single stands or simple setups and still get good results, sometimes better than good results in terms of the lighting that you're getting. We've got fixtures over here. I'll probably grab some of the fixtures from over here at the table, and then I've got some modifiers over here. And I think we'll probably just start right now with a one light setup. And I'm just going to roll this in. This is just a C-stand. You can buy feet for C-stands, by the way. Wheels for C-stands. And what I have here is I have a 4x4 frame. It has magic cloth on it, which is kind of a very thick style of diffusion. I have to remember to look into this camera. I'm getting used to this setup. And that's just on a C-stand. We've got a long Cardellini or Mathellini head. And then on this side, I have a super clamp or a Mayfer clamp. And then there's an arm here. It's a very, very heavy duty arm. There's a few companies who make these. And then I have the P60C, that aperture light on here. So I can wheel this around. It's all on one stand. And as you saw before, the P60C can also be battery powered. So I'm going to go ahead and kill house lights so that we're not seeing those anymore. And then we'll switch over to the Hero camera and you can see that. And then I'll come over and check on questions. So switch over to this. And then we'll start to dial this in. Right now, my camera is set, just so that you know, it's set to about, what is it at? 800 ISO. This light's at 3200 Kelvin. And the reason it's at 3200 is because, well, that's what the rest of the lighting in this space is like. And we're just sort of coming in from the side here, as you can see. And then what I'll do is I'll roll this stand around a little bit and then switch back over to the Hero camera so you can see that. This is something else that I'm going to show you in a minute, which I think is pretty cool and something that you should think about. So when you're using a modifier like this, there's obviously going to be spill, as you can see. And let's switch over. I'm just going to be moving it around, just sort of more to camera, away from camera. And then that way you can see what's happening. But there's always going to be a lot of spill with a setup like this. But if you can come straight through the modifier, and I'm coming a little bit more towards camera, we can actually see that in the frame there. You can start to see that this is now sort of between the backdrop and the camera, close to where the person would be interviewing. And sort of on this angle, when we're coming in, we sometimes call this loop lighting because it just wraps around and loops around. And with a 4x4, you're getting a pretty good spread here, a decent size catch light in the eyes. But sometimes, depending on how bright the light is or how you have it set up, it can or cannot be uncomfortable for talent. Also, depending on how used to they are to being in front of camera. And then if I come over here more towards the side, you can sort of see what that looks like overall. And that's, just one modifier and one stand setup that you could use in a situation like this. And I'm going to kind of do a riff on that, which I think is something to consider for other lights as well. So let me just go ahead and strike that. It's going to get very dark in here. And let's turn on some lights. Boom. And we'll go here. And we'll go back to our wide. Any questions while I do that? Anything at all? All right, looking at the Q&A. So that's that one for now. We'll take a look at some other things. And this is kind of an interesting one. The aperture light that I was showing you, and this actually can be done with a lot of different lights on the market as long as you have the right mount for your stand. The little mount for this light actually has a place to put an umbrella. So I took an old PhotoFlex umbrella that I had, a nice large one. It kind of has a silver interior, but you can get those from other companies like Aperture. From companies like Westcott. And I'm going to bounce this light into an umbrella. So you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like once I turn all of the quote unquote house lights off. And again, I just want you to see that we're taking a smaller or a harder fixture and we're starting to modify it. I'll answer those questions in a second. So I'll come back for that. I just want you to see this first. So let's go ahead and turn off these other lights for a second. And that way you're seeing what the actual light is doing. So there's that house light off. And then we'll go ahead and take my key out of there. And we're going to switch over to the Hero again. And it's not going to be totally different from what we saw before, but it's, again, a one light setup. So if London's looking to, sort of that interview style there, you can see the wrap is a little bit different on the background. And it's a big, soft source. We're bouncing light as opposed to coming through it. I tend to like that look and feel. And you can quickly make adjustments to this kind of setup where I could raise this up and I could change the angle of the light. And then if I start to bring that a little bit more towards the background, we start to go into the direction of what we would consider our standard Rembrandt lighting. So London, if you look right here and you open your eyes and we can sort of see what that catch light looks like there. And you can see that little bit of triangle here. I'm just going to go ahead and point that out. And that's sort of a standard Rembrandt lighting. So you're at about a 45 degrees between subject matter and camera and about a 45 degree angle. So that's another way to do it. And then let's just go ahead and modify this a little bit, lower it down, and let's just go to that wide again. And I'm just going to grab something. This happens to be just a little light stand. These little light stands, I'm using these BOA bags for sandbags. And I have, let's just turn that back on. Hopefully everybody can see everything. I have that little mini grip head on here, along with that mini Mathellini clamp. And what I can do is I can position this any way that I want, and it'll lock in. And then we can go ahead and take a look at what that frame looks like. And all I'm doing is I'm going to grab some of the light that's coming off of my key. And you can see that when I start to walk that in, that there's my fill that's coming in for talent. All right, let me come back over to here. I will answer a couple of quick questions. And then I'm going to get back into some other setups. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and do that. Methodology decisions for setting up lighting. Well, it really has to do with the type of mood that you're looking for. That's a big part of what you would do, when you're doing that. So do you want it to be a little moodier? Do you want it to be sort of evenly lit? Do you want to have a lot of ratio of light to shadow? It's sort of what is the tone that you're trying to create with the interview or the scene that you're lighting and you're doing. Main camera I'm using, these are all Fuji cameras in here. So the Hero camera is the Fuji X-H2S, but I've got X-T3s, X-T4s in here. I said ISO 800, what's your aperture setting on the Hero cam? It's a 2.8, which is kind of a standard nowadays for interview lighting. Allows you to be in a small space and get a shallower depth of field. And then somebody's asking, what light am I using now? Do you mean in the lighting setup or here for the key? The key's a mix panel 150. The first two setups were both the same light, that Aperture P60C light. And then the bags are they have shot put in them. They're BOA bags, BOA bags from Matthews Studio Equipment. And the Hero Cam's APS-C or Super 35. Unrelated, what mic am I currently using? It's a HS2 headset mic. I don't love the Tony Robbins thing with the looks like a tick, floating tick over here, but it's good for when you're doing these types of workshops. And then that's going into the Wireless Go 2, which is going into a Mix Pre 6.2 into camera. So that's the answer, I think. For a solo on location studio, do you have the same types of light recommendations? Yes. I mean, the thing that I want to say about today is you have to think about what the ambient light is in the space. This is a controlled environment, so we can use smaller fixtures like this and like these tube lights and things like that. Once you start to have more ambient light, there's more light in the space, then you tend to have lights that have more output. But generally, the way you modify the lights can be very much the same. And yeah. All right, let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Do I have a favorite focal length for interviews? It kind of switches, but I'd say somewhere between 23 and 85 millimeters, sometimes longer, especially for a B cam. For instance, this is a crop sensor camera, but I'm going to switch back over to you, London, right now. And I have a second camera over here, which is a 90 millimeter focal length. And that's our B camera. You can see that in that B camera, I can see that fill. So I'm going to have to walk that out a little bit, but it's still doing the same job. And boom, they're not perfectly matched right now, but you guys get the basic idea. So there you go. All right, let's keep going with stuff because we've got more to do. All right. Good. You're okay? Okay, good. So let's go ahead and move this out of the way. And I think it would be a good idea to take a look at what a tube light looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to keep this light on here, and then I'm going to take this tube light here and just put it onto, again, a little nano stand with a BOA bag. It's got a 1/4-20 thread here. So I'm just going to go ahead and thread that onto here. And I have it on a little ball mount. This is a Manfrotto 492. You don't have to remember that, but it's pretty versatile. And let's go ahead and strike this. So we're going to turn this on. And let's see what color temperature we have right now. I'm just going to dial that in and see. And yeah, 3200. So we're in the ballpark here. So let's go ahead and kill this. And then I just want you to look right here and pretend that you're talking to somebody. Eyes wide open and just having the chat. And then let's go ahead and turn off any other lights that we have in the space. So here we go. That one's done. And then let's just see what this tube light looks like, right? So let's go ahead and you're pretending that you're talking. And there you go. And I'm going to go ahead and probably bring the intensity up a little bit. Let's just go ahead and increase that. And you can see as I start to move the light a little bit more towards camera or a little bit away from camera. I mean, it's a pretty broad type of light. The quality of the light is definitely different than the other lights that we had through the modifiers, but we can get there. You can see the shadows a little bit harder from those bigger modifiers we had, especially when we get into that Rembrandt type triangle. And even by walking in the fill here, you can see that we're getting a little bit more of a hard shadow, but for walk-in talks or for quick interview setups, or when the light is coming more from sort of camera side or that loop lighting, it can be a nice quick way. The catch light, if you look here, is a little bit smaller. So we might want to lower that light a little bit so we can sort of see it in the eyes, so on and so forth. But you get a basic idea of what we're talking about when we're using that tube lighting in a different setup. So let me just go ahead and turn some other stuff on. I see some more questions here. I'm not going to be able to answer all of them, but I'll do what I can to get into some of those. So let's see what we have question-wise. Are smaller softboxes 25 inches big enough, or is a 34-inch better? I would say it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish with your lighting. Most people are leaning towards softer, more wrapped light nowadays. So the larger the modifier, the better. Some manufacturers, in fact, Westcott has for their ice light a little thing that you can put on there which helps flag the light. It's almost like barn doors, but you could technically line that with something like aluminum foil, and you could use that to bounce, though it would be cooler because you'd be going off of aluminum foil. And there's also no reason why you can't take a tube light and just bounce it off of something. It just has to have enough output. So you can bounce it off of a larger modifier, and there's no reason why you can't do that. So hopefully I answered that. I'm going to get into some sort of kick lights and hair light type stuff now, because I know we're kind of, again, running out of time. So let me just open up the kind of space light again, where we can see the space. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at modifying sort of our fill and things like that. I want to bring in, this is the Westcott light, that little COB light, but I have it in a really big modifier here, okay? So I have it on a little rolling stand. It's about a 48-inch modifier. I have a grid on here, so let me just turn this on so you can see it. And we're gonna go ahead and use this as our key light now. And I'm just checking out, London, let's go ahead and have you have an animated conversation with nobody right now, and just start talking to somebody with some life. They're telling you something funny, things like that would be fantastic. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn off the room light here, and we're going to take a look at this. And you can sort of see we're right now kind of in a Rembrandt lighting, not quite as high. And then I can come a little bit more towards camera. But what's nice about the grid is it gives me a lot of control over the spill over the background. So you can see that here. I can also very easily go in and do sort of a split or a side key lighting, which is a nice kind of look and feel. And if I bring my intensity up a little bit, London, I'm going to have you get up for a second, and I'm just going to show everybody a little bit of an issue that you can have when you're actually lighting somebody who doesn't have a lot of hair. So I'm going to bring in a modifier here, which is just a fill, which is just a 4x4. And then I'm going to sit down on camera so you can see this. And one of the situations that you can run into is you kind of get this weird dead spot when you're in certain situations. And the reason, I'm just going to increase the ISO on the camera here because we have a lot of stuff affecting sort of the output of this. But you can sort of see here that there's this dead spot. So one of the ways that you handle that, my ratios aren't perfect right now because I'm just sort of dialing stuff in, is let me just show you what I'm going to do, which is you have to kind of create a false ceiling. So what I mean by that is I have a C-stand here, and I have a piece of foam core because I have a black ceiling inside of this studio space. So what this is going to allow me to do is for talent, especially bald talent, I can go in here and essentially grab some of that light that's over here to help fill in some of these dead spots that can happen in situations like that. Also, the other thing that I have in this setup, I'm so much shorter than London, is I have a little trick here, if you can see it, which is there's a little light that's coming off of this 4x4 Scrim Jim Cine frame from Westcott. And what you can do is you can dial that light up or down. London, if you wouldn't mind coming back in and sitting down, that would be great. So just walk in safely into our frame. And what I'm going to do is dial this light up and down a little bit so that if I want to have a little bit more control over the fill, I can actually have that. So let me just switch over to camera 4, shut this off. And you can see here that I can actually increase or decrease the intensity, but I'm not using that light directly on talent. I'm bouncing it off of this 4x4 right here. And that can actually work out really well. Also, depending on where you position your 4x4, you can actually get some wrap. So you can actually position it a little bit behind the talent, as you can see here. And then what you can do is you can get a little bit of wrap of light. It's almost giving a little bit of a kicker to your talent when you're doing that. Let me check my time. Man, it's going fast. Okay, one other thing I wanted to show you, which I really like, which has to do with the, let me, little overexposed here. Let me just make a little bit of a tweak there, is checking this out. Let's just do one more here. I think this is it. It's we're going to go ahead and introduce this light here, this little dash light, and I'm going to use that, and I've got it on this little clamp. So what I can do is I can actually just put this diffusion on here, and then I'm also going to turn on this little light, and we're going to use this in color mode or at a high CCT. I might as well just leave it at a high CCT or correlated color temperature. And I'm going to make that light very, very cool so we can see a contrast behind our talent. So we effectively are going to put a little bit of cool light onto the background, which would go down here. And if you've got gray backgrounds, then color will take really, really well in that. And then this right here, what we're going to do is we're going to clamp that onto this panoramic frame here from Manfrotto that we're using for our backdrop. And that can be our little kicker light. So we can actually dial that up or down. And then if we switch over here to our hero camera and I shut off the overhead, we can start to see what's happening there. And we're almost done here. And you can sort of see here that depending on the position of where this little light is in the background, and I love about this 1-footer is you can carry that anywhere, but the gray, especially if you have more of it, the gray will take on essentially any color that you're throwing at it. So you can go ahead and put a little bit of color into what you're doing and have a little bit of contrast when you're actually lighting your subject. And you can also see, again, that little light in the background, that little dash light here. And as I dial that up or down, let's just go ahead and take a look at it. And then I'm coming over because I know I'm running out of time, which is always the case. And you can see how that light actually plays. If I wanted it to be just a more standard hair light, I could very easily just go ahead and put that at the top of the frame. So you get the basic idea of what we're talking about.
Jem, thank you so much. You went through so quickly, so many cool setups, and we learned so much. We know about not just the styles that you were talking about, but all this equipment. So that was a really great lesson for us. And we really thank you so much for your time. Catch up on our past meetings. We just launched this past October's meeting, which was American Murderer, previs on an indie budget, and that was with director Matthew Gentile and editor Matt Allen. Previs can be used on indie budgeted films, and what Matt Allen, the editor, did is he taught himself some previs software, Shot Pro. So he taught himself over the pandemic, and then they used it to map out, to do some planning and to map out complex scenes, but also to show proof of concept. So this technology can be used in independent feature films as well. And that is on our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, click the bell icon, and then you'll be notified every time we have a new video. Be sure to connect with us. We are on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Use the hashtag LAPPG. If people are still using hashtags, I don't know, maybe they are. I'm not quite sure. And also a huge thank you to our partners. At the platinum level, we have AJA, and at the gold level, Adobe, Blackmagic Design, OWC, Zeiss, and Frame.io, an Adobe company. And at the silver level, we have Isotope, SGO, Media Silo, Small HD, and Teradek. So it's not just these wonderful companies, but it's all of these as well who help us keep going. We have supporting companies, media companies, and community companies. And as I may have mentioned at the top, 14 years. So we do have a lot of people to thank for helping us continue to bring you guys great content. It's a wrap for tonight. So thank you. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care.